Welcome to Securing America with me, Frank Gaffney, the program that's a kind of owner's manual for protecting the country we love against all enemies, foreign and domestic, to the glory of God and His kingdom. We're going to be focusing today most urgently on the latest developments in Ukraine. What has been happening there at the hands of Vladimir Putin and his invasion force, what the Ukrainians have managed to do to that invading force, and where things are likely to go from here. And we're thrilled to be joined by a very, very proficient and highly regarded expert on the Soviet Union and more recently Russia, who has taught for decades at the Army War College, has written extensively on the Kremlin and its masters under successive regimes, and who is, I think, regarded as truly one of the country's preeminent authorities on Vladimir Putin and the kind of agenda that he is manifesting in this incident and what his larger designs are on Europe and perhaps us as well. His name is Dr. Stephen Blank. We are thrilled to have him with us always. And I may just say as well that he is a senior fellow these days at the Foreign Policy Research Institute and very active contributor to the public policy debate there as well. Steve Blank, thank you very much for joining us, sir. Good to have you back.
It's my pleasure, Frank.
Let me ask you to just sort of level set for us, if you would, Steve. It's been about 5 weeks since Putin launched his invasion of Ukraine. Give us a sense of where things stand at the moment, and we'll talk then about where you think they're going to go from here.
At the moment, we are witnessing quite astonishing, actually, failure on the part of the Russians. I think that not only for me, but for my colleagues in the business, we are all taken aback at just how badly the Russian military and political leadership has performed here. They have not yet been able to hold on to more than maybe one or two, even moderately sized cities. The Ukrainian resistance has outplayed and outgunned them at almost every turn, despite a brutal and terroristic, even strategy that the Russians have had to resort to because the first strategy failed. And as a result, the Ukrainians are performing better than anybody expected. In the area around Kiev, which is the north of the country and the capital, the Ukrainians are actually now regaining ground because the Russians have pulled back several thousand soldiers from that front, which was going nowhere. The Ukrainians have thwarted their attempt to encircle Kiev. They are fighting like tigers in Mariupol, which is still not surrendered despite being decimated by Russian artillery and airstrikes. The Ukrainians took back the airport at Kherson, which was integral to the Russian plans in the south of Ukraine as they came up from Crimea. And there's going to be a major battle in the southeast and east around Donetsk and Luhansk provinces, the Donbass, as it's called in the Western press. The Russians are going to try to encircle the Ukrainian army there. I'm not at all convinced they can, but the war is at a very intense stage right now.
And so when you look at all of that, Steve, and clearly the Russians have miscalculated how this was going to go. Do you think Vladimir Putin is as surprised as many of the rest of us are at how this has played out so far?
I think he is. I mean, what we are hearing, and most of the reports are saying this, that one, people have been arrested or placed under house arrest for failure, obviously, to brief Putin adequately, because he'll never admit to any mistakes on his part. Second, there is widespread dissension and finger pointing, to use the journalistic term, within the military and presumably the intelligence community over there as to who got it wrong and whose fault all this debacle is. We learned last night that military officers are deliberately misinforming Putin, who is quite isolated where he is, as to the progress of the war and what's really going on. We've had 7 or 8 Russian commanders killed. I think there's been at least one suicide, and he committed suicide because he found out that of the vehicles that he had under his control that he was supposed to deploy in combat, only 1 in 10 worked because of massive corruption. And you can be sure that's not confined to his regiment or battalion. So we've also had reports today. The head of British MI6, I believe, Sir Jeremy Fleming, gave a speech, which is a rare occurrence, where he said that Russian soldiers are sabotaging their own equipment, or actually shot down one of their own planes, or are not following orders. We have at least one case where they tried to kill their own commanding officer. Um,
So morale is in the tank clearly,
Morale
and
has been in the tank from the
they're
beginning because they
yeah,
never told them that they're going to fight a war against Ukraine.
right.
And many of these
And
guys,
logistics has been
you know,
abysmal, and
everything
they've
logistics
found
has been
themselves
corruption,
up against a lot
logistics,
more opposition than they had expected.
tactical, tactical disasters. They had this 40-mile convoy parked outside Kiev. I mean, that's you're asking for trouble.
Right.
Yeah, and we have a video now of Ukrainians taking it apart, essentially.
Shooting fish in a
Um,
barrel, as they say. So
right.
let me ask you, Steve Blank, when you look at all of this, what do you think the prognosis is? Is this likely to see Putin doubling down, using even more of this massively destructive firepower that he has used in Mariupol, for example? Um, and whether the Ukrainians are going to be able, nonetheless, to continue to tie them up and beat them, in fact, in the field.
I think the consensus of most of us, not all, most of the Western experts who are following this, and I should emphasize, I don't have any access to classified information. So I mean, it's what I'm seeing in the journals, and newspapers, and on TV, and so on. Um, the Russians are going to double down to the extent that they can and try this encirclement operation against the forces in Donetsk and Luhansk, who are probably the most experienced Ukrainian fighters. They're going to continue this awful shelling of Ukrainian cities, but they're running out of ammunition. I mean, they're using precision guided missiles, which don't work well. I mean, only 60% of them are finding their target, according to Western reports. And they're using hypersonics to take out buildings, which is ridiculous. Uh, and they're running out of ammo. And in some cases, we hear food and fuel, which again is absolutely astonishing. But I don't think that they can carry out a large scale encirclement operation in the Donbass. They're going to do an awful lot of damage, and a lot of people will be killed. And this is quite tragic, but
Yeah,
they're
but
not
it,
going to
it
win.
fits it fits a pattern for Putin, does it not? Of
It's not just
sort of a
Putin. I
scorched
mean,
earth
right.
strategy.
Well, it's not. Well, scorched earth is actually when you're in retreat and you burn everything as you're in front of you. But it's a Russian military tradition. It goes back 500 years to depopulate enemy territories, deport, destroy, and then move Russians in. Now they've done all this with, but they're not having any success. They have
This sets up
carried
very
out.
nicely what I want to turn to with you next. We're going to have to take just a very short break with Dr. Stephen Blank returning on the other side of it to visit about, so is there something that Putin can do that might make a more decisive outcome possible as far as he's concerned? More destruction for sure, but also perhaps conducive to getting the terms that he is seeking from the Ukrainians and for that matter from the West more generally, I suppose. We'll be talking about the nuclear option with Dr. Stephen Blank on the other side of this short break. Stay tuned.